So in this week's video, we're going to be going over some of the must-have items that you should be considering if you're thinking about buying a tiny house or building a tiny house or just living in a small space in general. So to kick off the list, we've come outside to visit our lovely service hatch. Something that is really important in the service hatch is our water pump. Now, I'm not a plumber and I'm not sure whether this would apply to everybody, but if you're like us and you're not plumbed into the mains water and you have a water tank, then you're going to need a water pump. So the water pump that we have is the Salamander ep.26. This is actually an upgraded pump. I'm not really too sure of the technicalities of it, but the old pump didn't have the same amount of power or sensitivity as the new one does. So with the old one, we had to turn on multiple taps, or even in cases I had to siphon the water out the tap with my mouth just to get the pump to kick in. Whereas this pump, you just turn on any tap in the house and within 2 seconds the water pump kicks in and then you've got full pressure in your house. It's a bit pricier than the other one, but it's probably one of the most important things you can have in the house. So without question, the first must-have of being in a tiny house or any small space, if you've got a gravity fed water system, is to get yourself a decent water pump. You won't regret it. So the next thing on our list of things that you must have if you're going to buy a tiny house is a decent dehumidifier. We use this one, which is a Miyako or Miyako or Miko or however you pronounce it, 10 litre dehumidifier. This is a good balance of size and efficiency for our house. If it was much bigger, I think you can get a 20 litre one, it would just be far too big, and if it was smaller then it would just be too small really. So the 10 litre one is a really good size for the house that we've got. We don't use the dehumidifier so much in the summer months just because we don't need to. We can have the windows open, but in the winter months when it's really cold outside, you've got all the windows shut to try and keep the heat in. The house just turns into a steam room really. The condensation can get really bad. If you don't manage it, you'll get mold pockets in the corners. We moved into the house at the beginning of December last year, and it was probably the worst time to move into the house just because we weren't prepared for the level of condensation we were going to get in the house, and we ended up getting mold pockets everywhere and we had to throw away quite a few things because they just got covered in mold. So get yourself a decent dehumidifier. We do use this to help with drying laundry as well, so when we do a load of washing, we'll put the dehumidifier next to the washing on the clothes horse, leave it running overnight, and that tends to do quite a good job of sucking out the moisture from the air that comes off the clothes. It only uses 150 watts of power on full power mode as well, which I think is quite good. So we pay about 18 pence per kilowatt hour in electricity, so I think we could leave this running for about 8 or 9 hours and it would only cost us about 18p. So I think cost-wise it's really good. It does an amazing job of dehumidifying the house, but just take it from us, if you're going to live in a small space, then you've got to get yourself a decent dehumidifier. So moving on into the kitchen for must-have number 3, and I think this is probably a must-have for anywhere, to be honest. This isn't just tiny houses, but our lovely pan rack that we have on the wall in the corner of the kitchen. Without this pan rack, I don't know what we would do with regards to putting pans away. We have nowhere to put pots and pans. This wasn't particularly expensive. I think it was maybe £20 on Amazon. I think we got 2 racks actually for £20, but we didn't need the second one, so I think we gave it to someone else. It's also great to be able to just grab the pans off the rack and use them straight away rather than having to get them out of a cupboard. Maybe you've got the small ones inside the big ones, you've got to mess around with all the pans and get the one you want. But having a simple pan rack on the wall makes life so much easier. It frees up a lot of space. So definitely make sure you get yourself a pan rack or leave space in your kitchen for a pan rack. God, I feel like I've said pan rack about 100 times. But yeah, well worth the investment, and for only about 20 quid, you can't go wrong with that really. So while we're here, we might as well talk about number 4 on the must-haves list, and that, my friends, is our underfloor heating. This is our thermostat just on the wall, so we can just turn it on. Not that I want it on because it's quite warm, and then you can just adjust the temperature you want, and then it will just flick on, and that will just turn the underfloor heating on. For probably about 5 to 6 months of the year, we keep the underfloor heating on all the time. If you set the temperature that you want and it reaches that temperature, it will turn off. But then when it drops again, it will turn itself back on again. So it's just a thermostat really. But the main reason you should consider getting underfloor heating is because with the tiny house, I guess this is the same with any caravan or motorhome or anything, the floor is raised off the ground, so there's a lot of airflow that gets underneath, and the floor in the winter gets freezing cold, and the underfloor heating just keeps the floor at a nice warm temperature. It does also heat the house somewhat because the heat rises, although when it does get really cold you will need to assist it with something else, but it does do a really good job of keeping the house at a nice temperature for most of the winter really. And if we were to build another house, I would 100% put underfloor heating in, and I think that you should really consider it too, because it's so easy to do, it's relatively efficient, it heats the floor, the heat rises, it keeps a nice temperature in the house. It just makes sense really. So the next thing that we would highly recommend is to get yourself some microfiber bath towels. We've got one of these each, the dog's even got one. We do have some normal towels for drying the dog because he's got really long fur, so the microfiber towel, if he's really wet, isn't enough to dry him, so we do have some thicker towels. But these are a nightmare to dry, they take so long. If it's sunny outside we can stick them out, but if it's winter and we've got to dry the towels inside, like, these just don't dry ever, they just stay wet for like the whole winter. So get yourself some quick drying microfiber towels, but you will love your life when these towels are dry when you go to use them, rather than being soaking wet like a conventional cotton towel. But beyond the bathroom, you might want to start thinking about what fabrics your clothes are made out of, because whenever anything gets wet or it gets washed and it needs to dry, you'll really thank yourself if you have quick drying materials. When I look for new clothes now, I'll always try and ensure that they're not made from cotton, because cotton just absorbs water like a sponge and it just takes days and days to dry. Whereas some of your other materials such as polyester or nylon, they dry an awful lot quicker. So if you hang your laundry up overnight, then everything will be dry apart from your heavy cottons. It's something that I'd never really thought about in my entire life, but now it's become a lot more apparent to me that if I have quick drying clothes, then that makes my life a lot easier, because then we can put the laundry away rather than just moving it around the house all day because nothing's dried. But generally, just start to think about quick drying fabrics and avoiding cotton like the plague, because it's just a nightmare fabric that just takes forever to dry. And yeah, it's a real pain. So for the final must-have item, if you're going to live in a tiny house, is a compact, cordless vacuum cleaner. We've got a Dyson V8. We got this in a Black Friday deal a couple of years ago actually. It was expensive, I think it was £300 we paid for it, reduced from 400 or something. I can't imagine how difficult it would be to hoover the house, upstairs, downstairs, carrying around a big massive hoover. It just wouldn't be practical at all. This one disconnects, you can put different heads on it and all kinds of different things. Also, because it's just hanging on the wall at all times charging, if you just need to do a quick 10-second zip round with a hoover, you can just take it off the wall, razz it round, put it back on, battery's charging. But we've had this guy for, well, nearly 2 years now, and it's been absolutely flawless ever since the day we bought it. I don't think I'd ever go back to having an old vacuum cleaner, even if we lived in a normal house. These are just so useful, and especially if you're in a tiny space, then you're just not going to have room for a big vacuum cleaner. So definitely think about getting yourself a cordless vacuum that you can just hang on the wall. Dyson is obviously a very good brand to go for. I would definitely recommend getting a Dyson, but whatever works for you, whatever budget you've got, definitely get yourself a compact vacuum cleaner. So there you have it everybody, 6 must-have items if you're considering buying a tiny house, building a tiny house, living in a tiny space. These are the things that we have found over living in the house for almost a year now, and we would definitely highly recommend that you consider some of these products that we've shown you. I will leave the link to all of them in the description below. I hope that you found this video helpful. There may be things that we've mentioned that you haven't even considered. When we first moved into the house, we didn't have a clue what we were doing, and these are things that we've just discovered over the months of being in the house really. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a big thumbs up if you did. We see you guys tomorrow for another one, but until then, safe drive, stay alive, have a lovely day, don't spill your custard, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.